Arsenal continue their assault on top four, largely on the basis of being, and this is very important, better than those other clubs. This is the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, there's so much discussion at top four, as there should be. It does have a Champions League place on the line, and it is quite important for the future of the club and for our general happiness and competitiveness and all of those things. But, you know, the focus on top four is so much about games in hand and who's picking up points and what's happening. But I do think it is important to recognize that we are actually a better team playing better football than those other chumps that would like to finish above us. And I for one, don't want to lose sight of that. I also think the only downside of the top four chase is that it is tense, it is urgent, it is important, but maybe just taking attention off being able to live in the moment a little bit, just embrace the moment. Everybody knows that I am one for just living in the here and now. And in the here and now, Arsenal are a hell of a lot of fun to watch. A hell of a lot of fun to watch. And it is a long time coming. I have to admit, one of my big gripes, one of the reasons I said I was struggling to have patience, I was struggling to trust the process, or Austin trusty the process, is that it needed to be entertaining, that people will have more patience when it's entertaining. And right now it is entertaining. But the irony is it's not just entertaining in vain, it is entertaining and winning. So there's really nothing to complain about. I will try to find something because I don't want to disappoint the loyal fans of my complaining. But I think there are people here who have more important things to add. And it is my joy to introduce my podcast brethren, starting with Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Pause with My Pencil. Pause.
Woohoo!
And Clive, you can find him on Twitter at Clive PFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And it says here, Martim Odegaard. Tim is on Twitter at Stobert. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Hello there, indeed. Look, there is breaking news that perhaps a Saudi Arabian investment group is going to buy Chelsea. But don't worry, there's no direct links to the government, and they are not at all associated with the Saudi Public Investment Fund that owns Newcastle. And when I say not at all, I mean they're entirely related, and it is extremely corrupt. But let's not worry about that right now. There are other times to go worrying about the future of lesser clubs than by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. And Tim, since we didn't get you on the instant reaction, I think it is only fair that I let you start the podcast with arguably the only real talking point. Look, there's a lot to say about this game. I do think that sometimes people start to accuse you of bias. Not you, but people generally. Like, you have a bias, you have a player you love that you always want to talk about. And because of that, anytime you talk about the player, it seems like you can't be objective. But like sometimes they are just so good that you have to purr about them. So I know I'm biased. I know it's just where I come from, but we have to talk about the star of the game. Tell me about Gabriel Martin. No, I'm kidding. Tell me about Martin. I did a thing there. That was a joke. No, Martin Odegaard is doing things on the pitch that make everybody better. And that was something that Arteta was really eager to point out after the game. And I think, Tim, that when a player is at their absolute best, the best thing you can say about them is they make the team around them better. And I've heard a lot of Ozil comparisons, and I get it. But there's a Fabregassian quality to his energy and his instincts and the ability to come deep and dominate from that position or get right into the box and score. He's real special right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the rising tide that lifts all boats kind of thing. And that's what a good creative player does, because the really good creative players, and Fabregas was great at this, is they recognise the strengths in their teammates and they tailor their kind of service accordingly. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Odegaard does, particularly when he drifts over to that right and plays with Saka. But I think he's got a really good connection with Thomas Partey as well, and that's a very virtuous little arm of the team right there. Partey to Odegaard to Saka. Those are the three guys you really, really want on the ball in this team. And he's very much, very literally and figuratively in the middle of that. And I think you can just see at the moment that the player is experiencing a kind of a rising confidence, and he's feeling himself, and you can see that in the way he delivers the ball at times, the dummies, the flicks. There was a point as well where he like feigned to shoot, didn't he, and then instead just did like a disguised pass over to Saka, and players only do that when they're really confident. That reminded me a little bit of there was, I think it was in the last season at Highbury, we played Middlesbrough and Henry was out on the right wing, and it's impossible to describe this move he did, but he like kicked his right leg up as if he was going to cross the ball, dummied it, and then while his right leg was up in the air, just like prodded the ball with his standing foot to Reyes. To his right, and it was just one of those moments where I think we won the game 7-0. I think we were 6-0 up at the time, and it was a party trick, and it's the same type of thing. It's just the sort of the thing that a player does when they're at the top of their confidence. And look, yeah, I felt differently about some of our summer signings. I wasn't really sure about Ben White. I'm feeling more sure about that at the moment. Wasn't really sure about Ramsdale. Feeling quite sure about that at the moment. Didn't know anything about Tomiyasu, so didn't have an opinion on that. But I really wanted Odegaard. And not least because I liked what I saw when he was on loan last season, but you just always had the sense that there were different levels there. And you only have to look at like the Wikipedia of his career to understand that, he hadn't really settled at Madrid. He'd been out on loan quite a bit, and like the only other season he really, really showed something was the season that he spent on loan at Real Sociedad. And like, what does that tell you? That tells you that he went somewhere for a whole season, because most of his other loans, I think, were for half seasons. And so he was very that shows that he was very in and out of the plans at Real Madrid, and they were thinking about him, and they kind of thought, we don't want to send this guy out for the whole season. And then it gets halfway through the season, they go, actually, we haven't found a place for you yet. Like, he was in their thoughts, but they couldn't quite accommodate him. And that's quite unsettling. And I think you can see now he's just found a home in a good team, an emerging team as well. It's got like a real economies of scale effect to it, because there's just quite a few players who look like this at the moment who are really kind of rising in terms of level, and none more than him, I think, which is quite the compliment, because there are quite a few players like that. And it just, I've said it before, it's just got a real flavour of the kind of Henry, Vieira, kind of even Bergkamp, the guy that had made the big move but probably made it to the wrong club, possibly made it too early. And then Arsenal's, quite a nice step from there. And I just think you're seeing that at the moment. And I think he's beginning to really appreciate the strengths of some of his teammates. He's getting the ball from Partey. He's giving it to Saka. Those are two pretty good players to be riffing with at the moment. And he's building relationships. And that's one of the things about this team at the moment. You sense there are relationships building. And he is at the absolute epicenter of that.
Yeah, and I think you can always tell, Tim, that a player is respected by his teammates when they look to give him the ball no matter the situation. I can think back several months ago where we'd get the ball, a center back would step forward and there'd be a player between the lines, and they just wouldn't give it to him. They'd slide it to another center back. There was no confidence to make the pass into tight spaces or into small corridors. And now they're giving Odegaard, and Partey to some extent, but giving Odegaard the ball with no room and no space. And he's like, oh, that's fine. I'll just Cruyff back heel it to Saka, then run in 1-2, and we'll get in for a chance. Like the extent to which the team is looking to give him the ball, I think tells you how they feel about him,
Yeah, absolutely. He is definitely the technical leader of the team, and he may even be more than that. And we've got an absolute steal there for that money. I'm sure there are plenty of clubs around Europe looking at this and thinking, God, why didn't we get involved for that kind of money? But that half season on loan, I think, probably tees up this move quite nicely. And I'm sure they had a conversation when we went our separate ways for a couple of months in May, and it was very much probably along the lines of, look, I understand, go back to Madrid, see what they think, see if they want you. If they don't, we will definitely have you. And full credit, not just for getting the deal in the summer, but really pulling that loan out last January, because it wasn't anything that anyone was really talking about or anyone really thought was much of a possibility, but it was a great loan last summer, and it's been a phenomenal signing this year. One of about 4 or 5 that have just immediately raised the level of the first 11, but he's probably been the best one, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, and he's added a bit of fantasy to the game, a bit of unpredictability. I mean, obviously it makes us so much harder to press. And I think partnerships are important. One thing though, Clive, we focus so much on his partnership with Saka, and it is brilliant. And I think in a way the focus on Odegaard is well-deserved, and maybe takes away a little focus that could be on Saka, if not for the way Odegaard's playing. But I think the partnership that actually is potentially more important than the Odegaard-Saka partnership right now is the Odegaard-Partey partnership. At the Palace game that I went to, in the fall. I'm not sure if I mentioned that I was at that game before, but I was at that game at the Emirates Stadium in London. And that was a game Odegaard played as a central midfielder in the double pivot. And I think it's one of the worst games he's had for us, certainly this season. He did not look comfortable there, and he didn't really seem to understand where he was meant to be. But now somehow, the way he's playing in the position he's been given, he can go forward and join the attack. But when he has to drop in or, come back to Partey and drop a little deeper, he looks very, very comfortable getting close to Partey and exchanging passes with him. That partnership, especially when we have to progress the ball back to front a little more, which we had to do a bit more in this game than we have in recent weeks where we've just been so far up the pitch. Their partnership is brilliant, and I think it's also allowing us to see the best of Thomas.
Yeah, I didn't think the Palace game he was that bad, if I'm honest with you. And I said this before, Elliot. I think that game was refereed atrociously. If it was refereed properly, we win that game. Right, so I just feel
a lot of stoppages too in that game. Never got into a flow.
That wasn't the issue. We played a few square passes. We got jumped on. I think Sambi played in that game as well late in the game, didn't he? I think there was a few issues around that space, but Odegaard wasn't the biggest one. And the fact they moved him tells you how good he is, right? So a couple of little things. I remember when I was a little bit younger, getting close to academy.
That covers a lot of age range.
It does, but. It's about playmaking, actually. And when I was at an academy involved, watching one close to one, they used to have one GPS guy, and they used to give it to the number 10. And the number 10 had to basically cover the most ground. And I thought that was really instructive, actually, because the way we grow up thinking about number 10 is almost like it's a luxury player. And they can just sit in the pocket and do things. And actually, nobody wanted to play the 10 because they have to do the most running. Do you know what I mean? It was quite interesting. Funny enough, Odegaard plays the number 10 like how the academy wanted to play number 10. He not only does all the playmaking, he does the most running, he does the most connections. That's exactly how it should be. And I think it destroys some of our previous preconceptions about what that role is. And because you've got to create linkages and partnerships in multiple places. And this is where he's excellent. He's almost like a luxury El Neni, shall we say, connecting and release valving everybody. But when he gets it, he turns around and he's got 30 pictures. And the pictures are one or two ahead before they've even been formed. And that's the key thing. His ability to see the next 2 or 3 moves is really quite apparent. And there's loads of clips. I mean, there was loads of comps of him coming out this weekend, obviously, and he's there for everyone to see. And to be honest, remember the West Ham away last year? He showed us a glimpse then, didn't he? That West Ham away game, he totally took it over, and he had, he orchestrated everything, and because of that, people work out who the hot guy is, and they connect with him. And Thomas Partey is obviously knows exactly how he plays. He seems to play. There's a level of intelligence within this group, and I think that's a very key word for the signings thing about next year: intelligence. And the intelligence and levels that they all play at, particularly 3 or 4 of them in that little pocket you're talking about, Elliot, Saka, Odegaard, Partey, up to a point Lacazette, the brain level is just there. And it's instant and it's one touch and they know each other's movements. And it's something the manager has spoken about, isn't it? Getting us to that one brain format. And I can see it. We can all see it. Come on, the stuff we see at the weekend, it's a joke, isn't it? It's literally a joke, some of this. And it's unique to the group. And so Thomas Partey is obviously, he was showing signs of connecting with Odegaard. If you think some of the games that we've lost, or had struggles with, these connections weren't in place. I'm just, it's just different now. And it's okay. We've got better. I think some people are looking for explanations as to why it's so good now and why it wasn't good back then. And did I analyze this correctly? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think people, relationships, having the right roles, responsibilities, knowing your accountabilities, being comfortable with your responsibilities, allow you to show your talent. And there are issues there. Amy Lawrence wrote a beautiful piece in The Athletic today about Thomas Partey. And she sort of intimated that basically he wasn't comfortable with his responsibility and he was probably putting a bit too much pressure on himself. And now you look at him, you think he's absolutely comfortable with his responsibility, and now he's playing within it and enjoying it and holding it. And I think it's just great. And he's not the only one, right? So right now, don't try too hard to explain it. Just enjoy it, and then start to look at, okay, how can we create depth? I think that's the next thing that's coming to my mind, because we will need depth sooner or later. And then can that depth get to these levels? Because that's the next phase, really.
Yeah. I think my only response to the depth issue is that, like, we also have to be realistic that when you have players hitting the level that, like, Saka, Odegaard, Partey are hitting, whatever depth you're going to have, it's very, very, very rare that what comes in off the bench can approximate that level, right? I mean, we're actually quite fortunate to have two very, very, very skillful, talented players in Smith Rowe and Pepe on our bench. And I think that is a luxury, that not every team can look to. They'd be starting on a lot of teams.
Can I just add to that a little bit, Elliot? So if you take Smith Rowe and Martinelli, for example, there's depth there, but stylistically they're slightly different. So depth doesn't mean exactly the same.
That's true. Yeah.
And we can develop another face. I think that's really important. I love the depth of Nuno and Tierney, for example.
That's a great point. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Two different styles, the way they carry the ball, the way they travel with it or don't travel with it. And Smith Rowe and Martinelli, same shirt number most of the time, but the way they play is slightly different. And I think that's what we got to develop.
Yeah, and I think good coaching also is understanding those differences, such that when you have to rely on the backup player, maybe you make some tweaks to get the most out of them. A great example might be Cedric, who this wasn't necessarily his best game, but he's been pretty good to very good at times since Tomiyasu's gone out. But one of the ramifications of Tomiyasu being out is maybe we've let the right back be more advanced and asked Tierney to do more all-court play, where he has to defend a little more and understand sitting back a little more, because that's not necessarily where Cedric's at his best. And we saw that in this game at times where Cedric did have to defend deeper or did have to try to play out from the back. Some of the warts in his game were more visible. So, Paul, that actually leads me to an interesting question. I think the interesting thing in this game is we saw something creep back in that we hadn't seen in a while. And I think, again, it's another really strong example of Arteta's good coaching, because after we took the lead, it's the first time in ages, really, that we kind of let ourselves get pushed back. And there was a period there of maybe 15, 20 minutes to end the first half where we spent quite a lot of time defending in our defensive third, which we haven't done in a long time. But then we come out after halftime and we were rampant. We were sensational. We were slick on the ball, one-touch passing, staying up the pitch a little more. And I think that's a credit to Arteta, who I'm sure at halftime would have made adjustments and reminded them that we don't want to sit that deep. But I'm curious how you felt during that period, because that to me was the first time in a long time we've seen ourselves maybe become a little more passive. I thought our off-the-ball work in that last 15 or 20 minutes of the half wasn't where it needed to be. And it's pretty clear that Arteta cleaned that up at halftime.
Yeah. It had some parallels to the previous Leicester game.
Yeah.
In that the last 15 minutes of the first half was where you felt a little edgy and they had a couple of really good chances. I mean, Leicester are quite good at the football when they're flowing. They have some average players. They're susceptible at the back. But when Maddison, Barnes, etc., get together and can connect, they'll cause you all sorts of pain. They're good players. So they connect two or three of those guys, especially because what we didn't try and do at the end of the first half was sit back. We kept our shape. So we had the advanced attacking eights, Xhaka on one side and Odegaard on the other. So if you think of that chance where who's waltzing up the pitch with the ball and puts that ball in behind Harvey Barnes over Cedric's head. Cedric gets the defensive line wrong, and Barnes is almost through one-on-one with Ramsdale, but it's kind of over by the byline, so it gets squeezed out. It's kind of a nervy moment, and that's in part because Xhaka's way up the field, and it reminds me of that Podence moment with Wolves, where again we're caught up the field and we're not switched on to the counter. So in fact, we've kept a very attacking shape and game, but that's a 15 minutes where they're kind of on it and they're connecting. And now we have to learn how to handle counters and transitions, bit of the Watford scenario. So we'll see. We're going to see some of this. This is the risk we take against these teams, where we're going for a win. We're not going to create scenarios where it's a draw. We've had 3 draws in the league so far this year. We either win, and we mostly win, or we lose, and I'm fine with that.
It's better. Yeah, you prefer it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're sticking with our game plan. Unfortunately, they were a little sharper, a little more on it because they needed, that was every team has a hot spell. That was their hot spell. And what you saw was an adjustment at halftime, not in terms of our setup or how we played, but we were just much more on it from the get-go in the second half, and we kept it on the carpet. We played out from the back. Now, I think we always assume we always play out from the back because that's been the narrative. But, we mix it up. You'll remember in the first half, White chipping it over the top to Saka or going longer to Martinelli with Ramsdale or whatever. And that's because Leicester had a really good line pressing our back as we were our back line as we were trying to play out, and sometimes we took the other option, and that might have always been the plan in any case because Leicester play a high line. Start of the second half, we were very deliberate, patiently building from the back, aggressive, courageous, and you could see Arteta on the sideline, especially after we got the second goal, saying, don't keep kicking it back to them like we did towards the end of the first half. Keep it on the carpet, play it out, keep control. He talked about the mistakes against Watford of not passing them to death. I wouldn't quite say we passed them to death, but we maintained much more control. We were braver and more focused about playing out from the back. And I think there was a real element of control that reasserted itself right from the start of the second half, reestablished our game, and from there we just took it home. Both goals were from set pieces, but they were also in periods of extreme pressure for Leicester. And this was a really well executed game plan. And what we're seeing is game after game, us raising the pressure and the tempo and getting the goals and playing for 90 minutes. Yeah. And that's what takes you home.
Yeah, and I think, look, it is funny because the talking points in this game wind up being the sensational brilliance of Martin Odegaard, obviously, the quality of Thomas Partey, their partnership developing. Tim, it's because we're playing some swashbuckling, exciting football right now. It is sort of overshadowing some of the really heroic work that's still going on at the back to keep these wins as wins. And because we get the second goal, we're not talking about it. But like Benjamin White has basically a goal line clearance that has to be made. Tierney has an incredible block coming in from the weak side, running into the box. I don't know who the block was on.
Harvey Barnes takes it off his toe, yeah.
Yeah. Ramsdale has a sensational save. So, there's still some really important last-ditch work being done defensively, and I'm curious how you feel about the balance, because I think there are some people that anytime you give away those kind of chances feel like the balance isn't right. I personally, and I think everybody's sick to death of hearing this and knows it, but like, I think if you're going to go more attacking and you're going to go try to win games and create chances, you have to occasionally have some last-ditch defensive moments. That's just the trade-off you're going to make. So it doesn't worry me, but I'm curious how you feel about those moments. Because again, it's the Ramsdale save, it's the Tierney block, it's the White clearance. And those, even though we outshot them 21-6 and out XG'd them 2.6 to 0.6, those were kind of scary moments in the game.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is really just down to personnel. Like when you look at this, we've introduced 4, maybe 5 players into the starting 11 this summer, and then you add Partey and Gabriel on top of that from the previous summer, and like the starting 11 has just completely changed, and basically all of those signings have worked. And so what's kind of happening at the moment, I guess, is that we're moving more towards the football that Arteta really wants, and we really hoped that he wants, because he's got the players he wants to do it, and that includes the defence. And I think you could see from the off on paper, really, when he signed Benjamin White and, he'd signed Gabriel before that. I mean, they're both really quite aggressive, front-footed defenders. They like making interceptions high up the pitch, but they're both pretty good one-on-one. I have to say, I didn't think that initially about Ben White. There were quite a few moments earlier in the season where I thought, he can pass, but can he defend? But yeah, he can defend, it turns out. But yeah, absolutely. This is about if you're going to be a good domineering team, like people have to come under stress, and it's how you do that. That's what defines top players, is how they deal with stress. And we're seeing it with Partey at the moment, right? Base in the midfield, and I liked what Paul said on the instant reaction. That's almost it's almost like we put the chicken before the egg in that, and basically Partey probably hadn't earned that level of trust with his performances yet, but it's almost like giving him that sense of responsibility was just a way of saying, right, we think you can do this. I know you can do this. You probably haven't shown it yet, but by giving you this role, you've got to do it now. It's like chucking him in at the deep end and saying, swim. I think Arteta made some very similar comments about Smith Rowe, didn't he, when he took the number 10 shirt? And he kind of said, maybe he's not ready for that yet, but I prefer a guy who's not ready for it yet going for it, and us supporting him. And I think that's what's going on in defence as well. He's got the centre-backs that he wants in the team. He's not so much lately, but got the right back that he wants. Gave Kieran Tierney a new contract, so that's his guy as well. He signed the goalkeeper. So these are Arteta's guys now, and there is, I think, that sense of trust that wasn't there in Arteta's previous two seasons.
Point. Yep.
And yeah, you're right. Like, this was the thing about I know this is like Arsenal's version of Godwin's law, that all conversations about Arsenal go back to the Invincibles, but you look at that defence, and what was great about it was they were all great one-on-one, like Sol Campbell, Kolo Touré, Laura and Ashley Cole. You could leave them on their own, all of them one-on-one, and they'd deal with it. And that's where I feel like we're kind of in that direction at the moment, and these guys can handle stress. And like, I was really interested in that thing Arteta said about when they scouted Ramsdale and they looked at how he responded every time he conceded a goal. And let's be fair, he played for Bournemouth and Sheffield United. There was a lot of evidence on that particular film reel, but they really liked the way he responded to all of that. And I think we saw a bit of that, in the Wolves home game, where that goal was conceded and he's geeing everyone up and things like that. So I do think there is just that sense of trust. And they have, like, the centre-backs, they both made mistakes recently. Gabriel against Wolves, and, Ben White possibly had a couple of ropey moments against Watford, albeit his overall performance was fine. And I think they've probably just reached that sweet spot where they know they've got the room to make mistakes, if that makes sense. And it's very much like, and Arteta's always been big on this. Even he said it about Mustafi as well. I think when he first arrived and Mustafi made that big mistake at Stamford Bridge and Luiz got sent off, and he said no, but after that he still had the intent to play. So I think they've got that kind of that security of, right, we're going to be brave, we're going to be isolated sometimes, we're going to be brave on the ball, and we know, as long as we don't get it wrong all the time, that, like, yeah, it might go wrong once in a while, but I know I'm not necessarily going to get dropped or admonished for that. And just having that level of trust, both in the players but from the coach, I think you can really see that working.
It reminded me of something with that Mustafi thing. Do you remember the other thing he said at the time, which was, when a player makes a mistake, the others have to get him out of it.
Yeah,
they have to kind of recover the game, recover the moment, bail him out. And you see that very much with our back three, our back five, the Gabriel mistake was it against Wolves for their goal. Maybe it was the first Watford goal. And Ramsdale.
It was Wolves, Paul.
Wolves, yeah, that's right. And Ramsdale kind of immediately geeing him up and saying it's all right, it's cool. And you get this sense that the three of them are in it together. They make a mistake, but they'll gee each other up. And we give them a lot of credit for it. But you see other teams that do it different ways, where they're shouting at each other and, like, that's not, giving them an earful. But maybe that's very copacetic with the Arteta culture of you bail each other out. You use that, use that motivation to get the back unit, to get the team to bail that player out, which gives the team the incentive to go and get that goal, to level things up.
Yeah, I another incident just kind of came to mind, that one of these like little things that probably annoys me far too much, but I really pick up on in games. When we played at home to Villa in October, and that was one of our better performances, really good, and we won 3-1. But Villa got it back to 3-1, and immediately after, I think the ball worked back to Tomiyasu, and he just whacked it out of play. And it was one of those moments where I kind of went spare. Because it was like, no, like they've just scored. Don't get just keep the ball for 30 seconds. Don't wallop it out of play and let them have it back when their tails are up. And I think like you can see that kind of stuff just doesn't happen anymore. And I think they've got that kind of trust within the team.
It is really interesting just watching, especially in the second half, the way the ball is zipping back and forth between players, one touch passing, just keeping, the crowd started doing the Olays. And like, I think everybody who isn't in the crowd, who watches at home, hates when the crowd does Olays, because you're like, okay, someone's going to come in and 2-foot one of our players. Please don't do this. But like, we just kept it and kept it and kept it. And usually when the crowd starts doing Olays, there's like one more pass and it goes out in a touch. But we just kept it and the ball just kept moving and Leicester couldn't get to it. And being able to do that doesn't just create chances, doesn't just open teams up. It breaks their resolve. We saw Arsenal teams do that years ago, and we haven't done it for a long time. And even though I know we didn't outpossess them in this game technically, the periods where we needed to keep our foot on the ball and just take the sting out of the game, they just got sick of chasing us. And it was beautiful to see. And I think...
And in the center of those Olays was Odegaard. And I didn't get a bite at Odegaard earlier. But what's really...
No one got a bite at him.
And that comes to my point. All he does is scan. It's that pictures that Clive was talking about. But he's not looking at pictures for him. He's looking like, this is the team. He's like, how did he get that pass out to Saka when it looked like he was going to shoot? He already knew where Saka was like 3 seconds beforehand. He scans nonstop. He's so comfortable with his own game. I don't think he knows when he's about to do a flick. He doesn't think, oh, I'll flick this one. He's no fucking idea what's going on below his neck, because above his neck is just scanning. His body's so comfortable with getting the ball to where it needs to go. He doesn't think, ooh, I'll do this next. He has his pictures. He's scanning. He's looking at the team, the movements, and he's not looking at how things are. He's looking at how things are about to become.
Yeah, I think the hallmark of a really good player is that when they pull out a party piece or a trick or something like that, it's not just for show. And the thing I like about Odegaard is when it's a back heel, a drag back, a Cruyff flick, a dummy, it's because that's the best, quickest, most effective way to get the ball where it needs to go or open up space. And it's not an extravagance. Clive, first of all, I think from a coach's standpoint, it will have to have put a smile on Arteta's face, I think, that we got both of our goals essentially from set pieces, because there's the Martinelli corner kick to Thomas Partey, and the handball comes from a well-taken set piece that nearly results in a goal before the handball leads to the penalty. Arsenal actually got a penalty, so we'll talk about the next time that happens in a couple seasons. But Clive, like, Leicester are bad at set pieces. It's an area of weakness for them, and we exploited it for the 2 goals in the game. And I'm curious, when a coach can come away from a game saying, let's target them in those areas, and gets both goals from those areas, I think that reflects well in the coaching, right? I mean, because you're looking at their weakness and you come away from the game and saying that's where we got both our goals, by attacking their weakness and having a plan for that.
Yeah, there's a flow to this game. I mean, we scored a very similar near post corner at Leicester. I think Gabriel backheaded it into the corner.
They're really bad at corners.
They highlighted on TV that, funny enough, Luke Thomas gambled and jumped under both of the corners and we scored. I think it's there was a little clip there I thought was quite interesting of Xhaka running to a set piece coach on the first goal. Again, that shows you the bond with the group, the players and the coaches. I mean, doing set piece training, trust me, lads, it's pretty boring because you're standing and you're doing it repeat, and players generally hate it. Right? So, and it's not that good. So when you see something come off though, the results, you do get a lot of pleasure from it. So I will say, can I just talk a bit about the flow of the game in it?
Yeah, of course. Well, I just wanted to bring that up quickly because I was curious, your take from sort of a coaching perspective, if a coach will feel a sense of pride in getting the goals in a game from a kind of thing that you would have gone into the game preparing your team for as a weakness, the opposition's. Because I do think that there's something.
But we assume that, don't we? That's why we assume we got a set piece and we score from it. We were scoring anyway. We just happened to score
yeah.
two set pieces
Yeah.
in this game. And that's what I wanted to talk about, really, was how we approached the game, how we were really at it and got at them.
Please.
And really pushed them back, but really played at a tempo. And I came into this season thinking that Leicester were a better running, a higher tempo team than us. And we out-tempoed them straight away. There wasn't many of us that would have thought we'd have finished above Leicester this season, based on previous couple of seasons, because they've been in the top four a lot of the time. And they're a bright young team with bright recruitment. We've spoken about them a lot on this podcast. And suddenly we just swatted them, right? Absolutely swatted them in a way where they used to swat us on occasions in not too distant past.
They're literally having to slash their James Madison fee every time they watch Martin Odegaard play.
And I was one of those at 50-50. It was pretty cool either way it went until the money became too big, and it obviously became Odegaard was the one to go for. And luck I didn't shout too loud about that, because I would have looked really stupid otherwise, because he looked...
Save that for me, Clive. I got you covered on the looking stupid.
Well, he showed at the weekend there's no comparison, right? So both very good players, but one is literally running football matches, right? So there was a period when we were, on top, and then we sat away. And I think this is the period to really focus on. We sat away, and what we tried to, and this is the only thing that went wrong, when we regained the ball, we didn't retain it for 2 or 3 passes. That's all it was. We heard we talk about retain. We just either booted the ball away, Tommy Asu style, that Tim alluded to, booted it away, or we tried something spectacular off one touch, like a really difficult pass, and we kept giving it away. And all that did was allow territory to go against us. And we got into half-time, and then we said, okay, we're going to retain the football. As soon as we went back to retaining the football and increasing the pass numbers and pass sequences, it was over from that moment onwards. And so that's an interesting lesson. When we do drop away into our 4-4-2 block, we haven't got to go big early. We can control and be patient on our exits out of defence. Can we keep it closer? There's a coaching terminology, first 3. Can we get to 3 passes and you build from there? And so that first movement when the ball gets turned over is really important, that we start to expand, get to 3 passes, and then progress through the thirds. Now, when in the second half, we were focused on territory and passing numbers, and then the game was done because, we scored the second goal and Leicester was too far back to come, and we could then have, party time, LA time. So that's the message for me. Retaining possession on turnovers for longer to create better offensive actions, which then push teams back. And what we didn't do, we didn't retain it enough, and that just encouraged them on. And we had a couple of chances, but that was it. In a game of Premier League football, the other team will have a moment, that's for sure. I think we could explain why they had their moment. And then what was really pleasing about this game was how we solved the problem. Whether it's the coaches or the players, I'm not too sure, but we solved it, executed, had fun, everyone went home, with a happy face on.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I think also contributed to that period where we were maybe under pressure a little bit, Clive, yes, we were booting it long, but like we see good teams sometimes do that. Liverpool will sometimes boot it long, and even if they don't win the ball, they use it to trigger their press. I didn't see the aggressive off-the-ball energy. When it went out for a throw in the Leicester half at the end of that first half, we weren't really getting at them. And so they were able to bring the ball in our half in a way we haven't seen teams be able to do as much recently. And like I said earlier, credit to Arteta, because we did not see that happen again to that extent in the second half. And Tim, just real quick on the wide players, Martinelli and Saka. One thing that I don't think can be overstated is the way football is changing in the Premier League to the extent that the wide players are the threat players, are the danger players in the Premier League. And we're seeing fewer and fewer dominant center forwards. I mean, I guess you'd say Harry Kane is like the best center forward in the Premier League right now, and he spends a lot of his time in midfield. Oh, by the way, sort of like Lacazette does, sort of the way, Firmino does when he plays, or, at the top of the D or whatever. But the reason I bring this up is one of the ways you neutralize the opposition is if your wide players are up the pitch and are threatening and creating danger, the fullbacks can't overlap. Their wide players have to help back defensively, and you start to control the game. I thought we had better balance in this game between Martinelli and Saka's threat. Saka was brilliant, as he always is. I thought Martinelli, especially in the first half early on, some of his first touches were outrageous. He had that move where he dribbled someone, got to the byline, right to the byline and cut it back for a shot that was blocked. But I think having that threat on both wings meant that Barnes wasn't in the game as much. Their fullbacks couldn't overlap as much, especially on the left where they have more danger. And that's something that I think is critical if you're going to be more front-footed to controlling the opposition is ensuring that they have to mind the wingers on both sides,
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, I thought both of them were excellent in this game. Both inverted wingers as well, so you kind of know what that means. Albeit one of the really pleasing things about both of their development, when you look at it, like Martinelli, always going to be an inverted winger because he wants to get close to goal. Saka has become an inverted winger. He's learned how to do that. Because he's learned how to kind of make those runs inside and spin his man and drive towards the box on his left foot. But also he's worked on his right foot so he can go outside as well. And that's one of the things I loved about Martinelli's performance as well, is that he's getting much better at going on the outside and beating his fullback. So it doesn't always have to be, I'm going to cut in and how do I get a shot? Like, you can see that's usually his first thought, and rightly so. How do I get a shot here? How do I get a shooting situation? But there have been a few times, I think maybe starting even with that Man City game, where he got on the outside of Cancelo quite a few times and beat him. And like you said, wriggled to the byline for cutbacks and things like that. So he's beginning to develop the other side of his game as a wide player, just as Saka did it lightning quick. Do you remember the first time Saka played on the right away at Wolves? I think it was. And it was maybe it wasn't away at Wolves. I think maybe that was the first time he scored from there. But he looked like a fish out of water for one game. And then the next game, it was like, oh no, he looks quite good there actually. And then 2 games later, it's like, yep, this is his position now, because he just learned it so quickly. But I think Martinelli's really developing into that. Like, yeah, we know you can like go into the box and shoot, but beating your man on the outside and doing a bit more of that, and he can do that. He did a bit more of that in Brazil, albeit a much lower level. I've always said there is a dribbler in there. It doesn't look pretty because he's so intent on getting towards the byline and getting towards the goal. Like he doesn't have time to make it look especially aesthetically pleasing, but he can drive at a player. And I think with Martinelli as well, I've said in recent weeks, even the Watford game, like, I wasn't worried about him at all, even though he wasn't as in the game as he was in this game, just because I judge him differently, just because you've got to understand the player you've got. And Martinelli, I look at a bit like I looked at Alexis Sanchez, a bit like I'd look at Luis Suarez if he was in the team. And it's like, not everything's going to come off. Might even drift out of the game for a little while, but this is an end product player. This is a guy who either gets shots or he creates things for others, and that's what you judge him by. And it was the same with Alexis. I got why people got annoyed with Alexis giving the ball away, but I didn't care, because I just thought he's going to keep trying that difficult through ball until it comes off, and it will. And when it does, that's it. Like, football's a low-scoring sport. I believe in attackers being volume players, and just keep trying it. As long as you're not like booting out the stadium every single time, keep going for it. And so I kind of judge Martinelli a bit more along those lines, almost more like you judge a striker in old money, But
you know what? He's not. He's not someone who then switches off when he's not on the ball. Like he works doggedly, like, especially if we want to be a pressing team, he's as good as any of our players at that side of it,
Yeah, exactly. And you look at you look at some of the players again, Martinelli, that's not a player that Arteta signed, but he'd have signed off on that if he'd been at the club at the time. And that two-way kind of player, like Odegaard is as well, like Saka is as well. And you look at the one player that isn't in the team, and it's Pepe. And Pepe is, he is not, like, in terms of talent and attacking output, he does not lag behind Saka and Martinelli. The reason he's not in the team is because he's not quite there on the other side, on the track. That's what keeps him out of the team. That's what keeps him as a cameo player, effectively. If Pepe put that together, that intensity off the ball, and I'm not just talking about running back and vaguely being there, but like intensity and actually trying to win the ball, like, he'd probably get in the team. But that's what Martinelli gives you, and yeah, I think the threat from both of them is amazing. Smith Rowe as well. I've always said I think Smith Rowe is more of an exterior player. I prefer him in that wide forward role. I think that's what he is. And yeah, that's just fantastic having three brilliant young players jockeying for two positions.
Yeah, I mean, Smith Rowe is 1 year older than Martinelli. I mean, he's just 20. And I do think the only reason Martinelli winds up being sort of a debate point about is he really that good or not, is he not as good, is because we have a beloved academy player who is the guy who would replace him in the starting lineup. And so there's always going to be a little of that angst about, well, should he be keeping Smith Rowe out of the team? And Clive, I mean, I don't think we should have that angst because they're both sensational players and they're both going to have big futures at Arsenal. I mean, Martinelli's been called up to the Brazil national team. That's not an easy thing to do. But for that competition for a place, I think we would just be enjoying the ride for both of our 20-year-old wingers,
Yeah, that's where I was going to go, actually. I think what's so interesting about football is the development angle and where these guys are going to go. And Tim's touched on it. Saka, what could he be? We could literally give him 8 positions that he could thrive in. I mean, so his career is not done. And Tim thinks Smith Rowe is an exterior player at the moment. I actually think he could be an interior player. But who cares, right? He's a very talented footballer that's developing and could develop either way. Could be a really punchy exterior player or could be a very intelligent two-way interior that can look after the ball and carry. The thing is, he could be either because his development and his ability to develop is really, really clear. Martinelli the same. Exterior at the moment suits our balance. Potentially could be a link player in the future in the middle of number 9. And this is the thing. Football can do this to you when you see a player development, they suddenly change. And Thomas Partey is a good example. Always a double pivot guy in the times when I've watched him. He sometimes played right back on occasion to cover when someone was injured. Always in a 2. Suddenly, at 28 years of age, he's a number 6 on his own for the first time, and he's ripping it up. Right? So none of us would have called that a year ago. And so development comes at different phases, and this is the absolute fun part of it for me. He's looking at a player and saying, okay, what if you could do that? What if you can do that? Can you do that better? And he's just having those core principles, core talents, and working as a unit, which allows us to make them fungible in our minds. And we should do that. And that's exactly what we want. We want to have the debate that Smith Rowe can play inside or out. But actually, it doesn't matter if he plays inside or out because he's talented to do both jobs. Do you know what I mean? And can we develop it in that way? And I think that's the future of this team. That's why I think we'll have a slightly nimbler squad, but players that can do interior, exterior jobs and higher up and lower down jobs. That's the future of this team for me.
And I think it's worth pointing out also that the other thing that makes the debate about which wing is thriving and which they're all thriving. The team is thriving, right? That's what matters. 21 shots, 2.6 expected goals. If you look at Scott's timeline, he's got tiers of teams, offensive and defensively, attack and defense over the last 10 games. And in attack and defense, but attack for the moment, we're right there with City and Liverpool, off in the distance from any of the other teams. So it is working. It's pretty clear to me in Arteta's system too. One of the wide players is going to occupy the 4th channel and even sometimes the 3rd channel, right? Attacking lane. And one of them is going to be all the way out on the touchline, right? So Saka's playing more in the half space or the elbow, the box, the corner of the box. And Martinelli more often is out on the touchline. And that's fine. And then, occasionally there'll be chances to switch it. But I also think that might change a little when Tomiyasu comes back. We'll have to keep an eye on it. I want to talk about complaining because it's extremely my jam. But before we do that, if we're going to talk about talent on the pitch, we need to talk about talent in your business. And the best way to talk about talent in your business is with Indeed. Because when you need the best talent, the only company you should be looking to, the one that gives you the opportunity to hire, to interview, to find quality candidates, he says, butchering the ad read, is Indeed. Indeed's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements or else you don't pay, which to me, look, there's a lot of services on the internet that promise, don't deliver, and you pay anyway. This is one that does it the right way. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find the candidates with the right skills, Choose the one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you every step of the hiring process with time-saving tools like Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Instant Match is one I like because that's the one where you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description. You can invite them to apply right away, and you only pay for quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed makes it easy to hire great talent. They deliver according to Talent Nest. That's right. According to Talent Nest, Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all the other job sites combined. That's pretty good. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/BlueWire. That offer is valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/BlueWire to claim your $75 job credit. Indeed.com/BlueWire. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire. You need Indeed. And the only other thing that I want to make sure you do is shave your privates. Shave them now, immediately. Go to your bathroom, get your lawnmower, shave your oh, you don't have a lawnmower? Well, that's a shame. That's not a shame. It's a disgrace. You are dishonest to your federation. You need a Lawnmower 4.0 because it is the best purpose-built tool for shaving privates. In fact, it is designed with the skin-safe technology and the ceramic blades to be good on loose skin. Now, you might say, well, I don't have any loose skin. I am taught as a newborn baby. Look, there's some loose skin down there. I don't care what privates you're sporting. You don't want to cut them. You don't want to nick them. You just want to trim the privates properly. This is the tool that does it. It's the Lawnmower 4.0. It has a long battery life. You can use it in the shower. It's wet, dry, travel lock, button lock. So if you're traveling, like when I go to London, I'm not going to be lawn mowing my shed travel bag the whole time I'm flying over there. It has the inductive charger. So you just sit it in its cradle and it charges. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And you can get their beautiful line of scents and body lotions and tonics and the shower gel and the shampoo. One place to get all your needs for grooming. It's manscaped.com. Use promo code ArsenalVision. Save 20% and get free shipping worldwide. Manscaped.com. Use promo code ArsenalVision. Save 20% and get free shipping worldwide. It's that simple. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Love that, man. Okay. Moving on, Paul. Speaking of complaining, one of the things that I think is interesting, right, is that when things aren't going perfectly, it's very interesting and easy to dive into what those things are, right? To start to say, well, clearly there's an issue here, and you can really get into the nuts and bolts and weeds of why that thing isn't working. When things are going well and you have a clearly defined style and players really performing at a very high level, your job is to just sort of go, that's great, isn't it? Yes, I concur. That is great. And so there is a tendency to sort of look at the pieces that aren't quite functioning right, or the piece, but ultimately, what I think is so reassuring right now, for a long time, this Arsenal has been searching for its identity, how it wants to play. And through the quality of some of these young players, but also through Arteta, I think settling on a system. And I think it took courage to say, I'm going to slightly shift Xhaka up into the left 8. He's spoken about it. He says he knows it's not the perfect fit. He's asking him to do it. But what it's done, it's allowed us to press more. It's given us more territory. It's brought the wide players in the game more. It's really brought Partey and Odegaard to life. And I'm curious if you really think, like, talent aside, that little tweak, this little shift to this system now that we are using is kind of has taken the reins off a little bit and let us go to this next level. Because I think we were always just sort of searching for the solution, and it feels like we found it now.
Yeah. So the thing I was thinking of that I think relates to this is, that old cliche we trot out at times to explain what hasn't happened yet, but we're hoping for, the synchronicities. That's easy for me to say. The automatisms.
Also easy for you to say, apparently.
Yeah. And we'd be like, whoa, what we're looking for here, and the next step is, and I don't know if most of the time it felt like a cliche that, you wondered, was this just something you said, the people said? We're seeing right now the automatisms. I'm getting nervous before.
Automatisms.
Okay, that's another way to go.
You say tomato. No one says tomato. That's the thing I don't get. Let's ask Clive, do you say tomato?
No, he says tomato.
Tomato.
You do say tomato.
Oh, he doesn't even pronounce the second.
I don't say tomato.
I say tomato.
He says tomato.
Tomato.
Yeah.
Tomato. Automatisms. Tim, do you say automatisms or automatisms?
Automatisms, stress on the second syllable, personally.
Thank you. All right, you know what?
Shouldn't Clive say automatisms because he doesn't pronounce the second T?
Guys, we're giving away Patreon content for free here. We got to save this. Come on, where are you going, Paul? Help me.
Automatisms is where I'm going, or as Clive would say, automatisms.
Tomato,
lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. We got to a point where those synergies between players mean that Partey can hold the midfield on his own with a little help, with a little support. That we're like, he's now at a point in terms of his game where he's good enough, and the players ahead of him don't keep spilling the ball in bad situations. Like one of the first things I ever learned about Pep and his system was this tucking in, the being in positions to make sure when you lose the ball, you're not wide open. And I think so much of what we've been doing over the last couple of years is learning to build from the back, but also to be secure from the back, from midfield, from the attack. So when we lose the ball, we don't get plowed through the middle. And, we had to make an adjustment after Watford because there were moments in that game where we were a little too open. And we saw it a little against Wolves, and we saw it a little bit against Leicester. And it's that balance, right? You can't be too safe. If you're too safe, you're not taking the risks that open up the other guys. And again, back to the point of we need to take enough risks that we keep winning games. And if we lose a couple, compartmentalize it. Don't get all kind of navel gazing about the fact that at some stage we're going to lose a game, like the Titanic, whose hull was compartmentalized, so that if one section got burst open, the ship wouldn't sink. Of course,
that's why it didn't sink.
Yeah. The key thing to make sure of is you don't hit the world's biggest fucking iceberg, and that's kind of what Liverpool is, right? Let's not hit a big fucking iceberg psychologically. Let's not make too much of it, because what we got to do is keep going game after game, doing what we're doing. It'll beat 9 out of 10 cats. And for me, like, there is the tactical switch of putting Xhaka a little further up. But like, he could have done that a year ago. Problem is, the fucking hole would have ripped open, and like the water be pouring through the gunnels. I don't know what gunnels are. And the ship would sink because there were too many holes, too few understandings, too little specificity in people's positions, too little switched on when we lost the ball. So it's really a process of all the different areas around the pitch, people knowing their jobs, their understandings. Like, nobody is more switched on when we lose the ball than Martin Odegaard. Because he never switches off. He's as switched off when we lose the ball. Like, I think it was the Wolves game, I saw him turn back into the box after we'd lost the ball. It was nothing to do with him. He should have been kind of 2 sections up the pitch, and there he is back in the box, chasing around, chasing things down. Everybody has a sense of danger. And like, when you have risk and reward, that sense of danger has been switched on when we lose the ball, knowing where the danger is, where you move to, how you shut that off, allows us to play more progressively, keep Xhaka up the pitch, keep Odegaard up the pitch, and allow Partey to do his thing solo. He's not really solo, but it kind of looks like he is.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's the switch, but it's everything we built along the way, all the understandings that allow us to make that switch and be more aggressive in our setup.
I was extremely skeptical of the idea that you need 18 months to get a system in place that can win you football matches and make you a good team. And I have been proven wrong, because the facts bear out that that's what it took. It took changing the personnel, teaching the principles of positional play, and getting players who will do the off-the-ball work and know where they need to be. I said this on the Instant Reaction Pod. When you watch the way these players rotate into positions based on where their teammate goes, when Martinelli moves into the half space and Xhaka now understands to rotate out wide or drops back into the left wing so that Tierney can push up, and you see those rotations and the cycles happen where they cover for each other. I don't know if they could have done it sooner, but they're doing it now, and the rewards are being felt. And Tim, I have
If it were easier, everybody would be doing it, right?
Yeah, you just say play like City.
Yeah.
Well, okay, great. Yep, good idea. I think I'll do that. Tim, 2 questions. The first one's a little silly, but how long do you think it'll be before Arteta actually comes on the pitch and starts playing? Because he's getting pretty close. Let's be honest.
Yeah. And it's funny though, we speculated, didn't we, during kind of when we had like the drinks breaks and games behind closed doors. It was like, well, what's going to happen when the crowd's back in and he's not allowed to micromanage quite as much? And I think there are 2 answers to that. A, try and stop him. He seems to have taken that as a challenge. But B, like in all seriousness, probably just doesn't need to as much at the moment, which I think is probably the more likely answer.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the silly question. The serious question is, in his post-match comments, Martin Odegaard said, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right because I thought I had it up and I don't have it up, so I apologize. But he said something along the lines of, he was asked about the camaraderie and the unity in the team or with the spirit in the dressing room. And he basically said, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It's the best I've ever experienced. And, you could say, well, that's what winning does. But I don't get the sense that they ever really weren't like that. I don't get the sense that there was a toxic atmosphere in that dressing. I mean, going back 2 seasons, maybe even through the Aubameyang thing, it didn't display itself. And I think, by the way, a lot of credit is due to players who are out of contract or getting older, like a Lacazette, who could easily have made this a tricky situation, out of contract next year, best friend in the team, ostracized and basically sent away. But I'm curious, because I think you may be wired a little bit more like me. No one's wired entirely like me, but in terms of not putting as much emphasis on the culture and camaraderie side of things. But it certainly seems to be something these players are speaking about, care about, and is contributing to our success. So how do you feel about him saying that, what it means for us, longer term?
Yeah, I mean, in one respect, you might expect him to say that when he's been at Real Madrid.
Touche. Yeah. Well, and when he's playing the best football of his life and we're winning.
Yeah, and like he's been out and around on loan, and so it doesn't feel like he's been in like a team environment, like a settled team environment for more than a year.
He did have
probably.
A very positive experience at Real Sociedad. From everything I read.
I bet if you spoke to him, that would be the closest he's come, and that's probably why, because he was there for a year.
Yeah, the coach loved him. They really wanted him back, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So, but nevertheless, I do still think there is something in that, even when I guess, to use Arteta's own words from his unveiling, when the tree shook. Those first 3 games of the season, you just never got the sense that those players weren't with him. And effectively, I guess, the only ones who haven't been, I mean, it's very obvious who they are because they don't play for us anymore.
Remember Arteta talking about it being the best time of his life, which seemed a bit rich at the time, and you look back and you say, okay.
No, exactly. You can see why. And I guess what I'm interested in now is, because I think you can probably say that Arteta's been proved right on all of that. But the thing I'm interested in now is like that was probably needed, that weeding out, that weeding out of the guys who don't quite toe the line or aren't quite with the program or whatever. But that is not a definite situation. You have to flex. I think as a manager, like that was probably the right thing for the time, that he had liberty and he had license from the club to do that cultural reset, and he could be very, you're either with me or against me type thing. That doesn't work on an indefinite timeline, as we saw with George Graham. And I often compare like what's happening now with the beginning of George Graham's reign, where something very similar happened. There were lots of kind of late peak star players who frankly were picking up a bit of a wage and thinking, yeah, Arsenal's quite a nice place to be. And George Graham came in with a blazer on and said, no, it's fucking not anymore. And brought in some young players and brought in some players from the Football League and things like that. And that's quite similar to what's happening at the moment. And you've got the real rise of that under Graham. But it did for Graham in the end, because that message wears thin after a little while. So I'd say not to be like Captain Bring Down here while we're riding the crest of the wave of it. And it's quite possible Arteta knows all this, thinks all this, whatever. And I guess while he's bringing guys in, he's bringing in the characters that he doesn't think will be a problem for him anyway. But I just think like medium to long term, it would be interesting to see like whether he flexes his approach so that the message doesn't wear thin. That's what I find quite interesting, just in like the rear view mirror, I think. But I think you could say at this stage that he's been proven right on a lot of these things. Whatever the ins and outs of the individual scenarios, basically the team's in a good place, and so fair fucks.
He said himself he made
please.
a bunch of mistakes in his recent interview, right? They asked him, what would he have done some things different? He says, I made loads of mistakes. So, he got to a good place. I think his fundamental instincts were right, but like he's got to have learned an absolute shitload of things over the last 2 years because this is his first job.
I think maybe I am guilty of thinking that a new first-time coach can come into a big club like Arsenal and just bring really good footballing principles and win. And not realizing that at a big club like Arsenal that has had some toxic culture and some big ego players on big money, later stages of their career and just chased out a previous manager, that there wouldn't be issues that had to be resolved that are not on the training ground, that aren't on the pitch. And that Arteta had never really had to resolve those. And by the way, his only exposure to those being resolved, I should say as a coach. I mean, as a player, he saw how Arsene Wenger did it. But as a coach, he saw how Pep did it. And when Pep doesn't want a player, he doesn't want to play. I mean, look at what he did with Leroy Sané. But City have resources to do that in a way that is difficult at other clubs. I think, Clive, one thing, though, that shouldn't be overlooked is what Arteta has. First of all, to Tim's point, the reason I think he will be able to vary his approach a little is when it comes to discipline, and I think as a parent you learn this sometimes, when there's a behavior that has to get corrected, sometimes you have to crack down hard and go through a period of difficult discipline. But once the behavior gets on track, then you can loosen the reins a bit, right? So like now he's got players that are doing what he wants them to do, that represent what he wants them to represent, that, train and play the way he wants them to play. And so I don't think he needs to go with the stick as much as the carrot. But Clive, one thing that shouldn't be overstated in my view is also that he has now delivered them to a point where all their suffering and all their work and all the pain and all the periods that probably weren't fun, not only are leading to winning now, but now they're getting to play fun football. Now Odegaard is getting to dummy the ball and backheel the ball, and Saka's getting to skin guys and score goals, and Thomas Partey's getting to pirouette in midfield and, and play the kind of football he wants. And as a result of their hard work, they're now not having to play sort of robotic defensive football. They're getting to be in parts of the pitch where they're having more fun. And so do you think that that's critical, that if you're going to instill these philosophies and the discipline and make them suffer for it, that in order for them to really reap the benefits at the end, the football has to be what we're seeing now? It has to be something that doesn't just win, but is fun to play, that they're getting to demonstrate their talents.
Well, there's a lot of assumptions in there, Elliot, I will say.
There are. That's why I'm asking if you agree with them. I mean, and they may all be wrong, but I don't know that you can take a group of players like we have, Clive, and ask them to play the way could these players play Sean Dyche football? Would they be willing to? Would they want to do that?
It's not about that. It's about the group, right? So what did he inherit? He inherited a bloated squad, so bloated he couldn't even name them all into his squad, right? So that's very difficult to manage. And then he, if you look at any sort of a change cycle, there's a good change model called Drexler-Sibbett, right? Look at that, Drexler-Sibbett. Mm-hmm. Any sort of change model, basically what that does is you have to find out. You set the goals and you set the tone and you find out who's committed, right? And that's the key phase. And to Paul's point about him making mistakes, one of the mistakes he sort of intimated he made was actually some of the things I wanted to do, I should have done sooner. He actually let things hang around a little bit too long.
Interesting.
Now, you look at some of those players that are no longer playing for us. Can you imagine them playing in this group? Seriously, can you? Can you imagine Guendouzi running around in this group, doing what he likes, flicking his hair, not running back? Can you imagine it? The team has developed its own culture. Right? That is the biggest reward for a coach. You try to get people along. You really put in those base fundamentals, those principles. And normally those fundamentals and principles are done as a group, not imposed by one individual. If it's imposed one individual, that individual becomes a single point of failure and it won't work if he turns his back. It has to be a group thing. All of the players, all of the coaches, all the physios, they've all got to be on board. All the analysts have all got to say, this is how we work, this is how we live. It's got to be that way. Because as soon as one little cog decides it's not, it's not for him. Or if Arteta then becomes a person who just turns around, I'm sorry, people will take the mickey if they're not truly on board. That commitment phase is really, really important. And it seems as though that we've gone through that now, and now you're seeing the upside, right? The high performance side. So now when you're bringing new people into this culture, you have to make sure that they're coming for the right motivations and they are committed. And so they're now joining something which has an identity. There was a story about a player that left Arsenal, which joined another club. I'm guessing it's someone like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, for example. And when he joined, he walked in the room, they said, "Don't bring your Arsenal attitude here." And that was the rumour in the game. Arsenal's attitude. Now I'll just guess. I guess it was Oxlade-Chamberlain, right?
Well, it just hurts to hear anybody speaking about the way
I've heard that. That's not a secret, and that tells you everything about what Arsenal used to be. That's why I've been banging on about this for ages. Right? It's so important. All you have is your dressing room. That's your place of work. If it's broken and fractured, we see what's happening at Manchester United. Right? It doesn't work. It doesn't matter who your favourites are. It doesn't matter. It's always about the group, the team, and how bonded they are together. And when you see it work, you go, shoot, this is what it's all about. I mean, all we talk about now is unity and happiness, and look at the players, and look at this, and look at that. How do you think that happened? It had to be them all buying into it and showing their commitment to where we want to go. For me, since Dubai, I've noticed a step up in goals alignment, ferocity to get to the target. Something happened in that little break, and they've come back and it's gone up again to a new level. And I don't see anything or anybody who's not on the boat. If you can spot one person, I can't. I literally can't. Even the players are not playing that are absolutely fully on board. And it's really nice to see that work. And the next phase, not just from a football perspective, but from a human being perspective, is going to be really interesting to see how he layers on top of this and layers underneath it as well with youth players. It's really exciting, I've got to say. It's really exciting. And I hope they get their just rewards. I can't stress that enough. Forget the fact we love the team. We always want to finish as high as possible. But when you're doing it properly, I hope they get rewarded for it. I really do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the point you made is a really, really important one too, right? Because now you can go out and get a player in the market who's supremely talented, and instead of saying, can this manager get that player to fit the culture? You know who's going to get that player to fit the culture? The culture. All the players, all the coaches, right? Because the players won't tolerate someone coming in and disrupting their winning culture and their unity. And that's a really, really good point, Clive. But Tim, I mean, as we round the corner here, I mean, this is another great win, a crucial win because it's a crucial week. I think Villa away is looking like a harder and harder fixture. Liverpool, even though it's home, I think they're the best team in Europe right now. So I think it's the hardest game we could possibly have. And I'll be honest in saying whatever we can do in it, I'm not particularly fussed. Like if we lost it 5-0, I wouldn't be upset. I mean, I'd be upset in the sense that I never want that to happen, but I wouldn't see it as a disruption to the direction we're going because it's a challenge that I'm excited to see how we measure up. It's a fun measuring stick, but I wouldn't expect us to quite be there yet. I do think that United winning at the weekend was the better result for us. They still have to go to Anfield. They still come to ours. We've got 3 games in hand on them, not to mention that they just didn't look that good to me. I've always felt that if we were going to get caught, it'd be by Spurs, which is the worst case scenario, and we still have to go to them. So I think this weekend went exactly as we needed it to. And I do think now it lets us go into this Liverpool game feeling like we have everything to gain and somewhat nothing to lose. And I know people hate the free hit thing. People are so annoyed with it. But I mean it in the sense, Tim, of like, it is a free hit in the sense also that I don't think we need a result for us to get to the goals we have for the season. So how do you think about this game? And principally, do you think Arteta will let them go measure themselves and play the way they've been playing stylistically against Liverpool, or opt for something maybe a little more conservative?
I think he'll want to keep doing the same thing for momentum purposes as much as anything. Very privately, he might think. I mean, he's the manager, so he wouldn't be prepared to write off a defeat. But privately, he might be thinking, along similar lines that okay, this isn't going to make or break our season. It's not this result. It's more the Villa result. Villa performance / result. That's more because that's one you'd really expect. Like anything, if we get a draw from this, great. There's another part of me as well that kind of thinks, you might think, and again, I don't think the managers or the players will or should think like this, but there's a little part of me that thinks, don't kill yourselves losing this game because we've got a slightly more winnable one on Saturday. But I think quite simply when a team and players are playing like this, you just keep them going. I think he'll make like the little adjustment of playing Smith Rowe ahead of Martinelli. And perhaps have Martinelli as an impact sub late on. Other than that, I don't see any change in the lineup, and therefore I don't see any change in the approach. I think he will let them and go and measure themselves. And I know we kind of did that at Anfield in November and got smashed, but that was different. That was Lokonga was starting and Tavares was starting, and I don't think Odegaard was back in the team at that point. I can't actually remember if he played that game, but this is a bit different, I think. And don't get me wrong, I probably still expect us to lose on balance, but I also think that there would be some value in, how everyone felt about that Man City game. I do think that people can compartmentalise when they see a good performance, and hopefully it wouldn't be as harsh as the Man City game in terms of, players falling over in the penalty area and the referees going, yeah, sure, we'll help you. But
you notice a very, very similar foul in the Newcastle-Chelsea game resulted in no penalty given.
Of course. And so, I think like a really good performance would still raise, and like a narrow defeat wouldn't like kind of compromise this feeling that the team and the fans still seem to have at the moment. I do think a big defeat might give that, might test that a little bit. But I'm going into this game looking more at performance than result, actually, and that's quite a nice position to be in.
Yeah, I have to say, I think also there are some teams that you just match up poorly with, and they're a nightmare matchup for us in a lot of ways, and especially I can't imagine we'll have Tomiyasu back. Sadio Mane has been an absolute thorn in our side, and attacking the Cedric side of the pitch is going to be something to keep an eye on. I thought he was beaten a few times in the Leicester game as well, so that's something to keep an eye on. I think absolutely critical, assuming Martinelli starts, and I don't know that for sure, but if he does, we have to have threat behind Alexander-Arnold. We have to attack his side. And so while Saka is our best player and Odegaard drifts to that side and we create a lot of havoc on that side, finding ways to get the ball to Martinelli to attack the Alexander-Arnold side, I think is going to be absolutely crucial. I will say this. If you had told me in December we were going to make a run at top 4, the run of games that just ended would have been the one I pointed to and would have said we're going to need to pick up a lot of points there. And guess what? We picked up a lot of points on this run. The Burnley draw, really the only exception to what has been a stunning run of results. But we have 12 games left now, and I don't think it is an exaggeration to say there are only 2, Leeds at home and Everton at home, that I'd regard as quote-unquote easy. I don't think there's anything easy in the Premier League. But even the games you'd say are sort of, what are the easy games in this run through the rest of the season? Southampton away, Palace away, Newcastle away, West Ham away.
Yeah.
I guess Brighton at home. Brighton are in a not a great run of form lately, and so maybe you can throw that into the Everton Leeds bucket. But like all the teams we play that you'd favor us against, really, we play away. The only hope we can have is that maybe like Newcastle don't need points on May the 15th when we travel there. And even still, there's going to be a challenge there. And like the Spurs game and the Chelsea game aren't even on the calendar yet. And that can complicate things. So it is the case that we put ourselves in this position with the good run when we needed it, but now we get into the hard one. And I think it's crucial that we don't let the Liverpool game become a block. And I don't see that happening. Clive, I do wonder how you think we approach the game, though, as a final thought. Like, Trent Alexander-Arnold's a unicorn. He leads the league in assists and an expected assist by quite a good margin. But defensively, he's weak and he can be got at. And that side is their vulnerability, in my view. Whoever starts there, I think, has to have some joy there. But I'm curious if you think we see a difference in approach, or we just go play our game, and how we could get something if we're going to get something.
Yeah, I think we should play our game, but be even more aggressive at doing it. I do worry about their right back to our right back switch. I think that's a major issue for us. So you know what? The fact we got Cedric there, let's attack him. Let's really get on the front foot and attack him. I think that's the only way. West Ham did it, and I think West Ham beat them. Just attack them. Because if you sit in and sit off, they will get you in the end. I think they are an excellent side. Every time if you go back and listen to all the podcasts pre-Liverpool game, I think I'm paying me apart from one I said we'd beat them. I turn every time the game comes. I think, what are you, idiot? But I do think we cannot be in a better place than this. Right? So why should we all get tense? I didn't go Sunday, but I will be going Wednesday. And every time I go to the Emirates, there's just a wonderful feeling there. And the players are reacting to it. If we're going to beat them, this is it. This is the time. Be aggressive, play our game. They're going to be watching us. I said yesterday, they're going to be clamping onto Odegaard. They're going to be trying to get to Saka. They're going to be trying to get to all these people. I think we have more weapons now. I think in the league game, they got to Lacazette quite quickly, and Odegaard wasn't in the same form. We couldn't connect. I think in one of the other games, Aubameyang played. I think Nuno played and then came out and got caught in a square pass. They're going to be all over us, right? But I think we've got more weapons in form, and so they can't quite get to us. I think when we played them in the Carabao game, Tomiyasu wasn't fit, and they did pick on that side. It'd be interesting to see what we do at right back. That's the bit that's worrying me a touch. But in the end, I've taken that worry away by just saying, how about we just let Cedric go, make him attack and really push them back, really be aggressive in what we do and play a game which suits Cedric, which is in the other person's half. So I think what we saw in the second half is the key. Territory, possession, directness, really getting in behind them, spinning it in behind, pressing forward, playing in their half, and play a game which they have been serving up to Europe for the last 3 or 4 years, right? Just do a little bit of what they do. And I think we've got more players in form to really attack this game. And if we don't win, the most important thing, like at the end of the City game, is that everyone's together still, because it doesn't mean the target's gone. And so that's where my head is at the moment.
We're a little unlucky because ordinarily they would have had United at the weekend and they might have had an eye on that game. But as it turns out, they're going to have Forest in the Cup, which, they're not going to be thinking about when they travel to the Emirates. I do think that the atmosphere at the Emirates right now is such that I think it does create an edge that maybe hasn't been there in past seasons. It will be really, really up for it. It's a hard game. It's a hard game. They are absolutely sensational. And even without Salah, they have so many players that can hurt you in one-on-ones. I think a critical component of what we do is we have to win second balls, because interestingly, Liverpool will go long. They win the second ball and then they get it quickly to Mane in space or Jota in space or whoever it is. And we cannot let that happen. So I'll be curious to see if Arteta's inclined to just let Xhaka get a little closer to Partey, if he wants to play him there. And I'll also be curious to see how Klopp tries to attack. One of the fun things about this too is, look, we're being measured against the best here. We think we have a new system that can win us some big silverware down the line. So I'll be curious to see how Klopp tries to find the holes in it, tries to find the weaknesses in it. This is a stress test, right? I mean, ultimately, Tim, that's one of the cool things. We think we've found a system that can be the future, that can lead us to, what Liverpool's achieved, European glory, domestic glory. It's going to get stress tested in this game. And sometimes those tests are a good way to understand what you're going to have to fix for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've said it a million times, but Liverpool are the example to us, right, in terms of how you become competitive. And they went on this journey as well. Like I remember them getting walloped 5-0, by Man City. That time I think they had Mane sent off, but and they got absolutely thumped 5-0. And I think Jurgen Klopp not quite shrugged it off, but he said something about, I can't come here and just put 10 behind the ball and hope to win the lottery. I think that was his kind of line was, yeah, you can play Man City and you can retreat into your shell and you can put 10 behind the ball, and that probably works once every like every team does that, right? And what happens, like maybe 1 or 2 like every year get something by doing.
It's always Spurs, for fuck's sake.
and he was like, I think he saw that as part of their journey, you know. And look, we've taken a couple of shoeings off of Liverpool, but I felt differently about the one at Anfield this season compared to. Do you remember in this fixture last season we lost 3-0 to Liverpool and we didn't get out of our half, and it was just. It was one of those games that really started to make me think, oh God, is this manager the one? Because like this really like.
Didn't we have a phenomenal first half against them in the reverse fixture? The away fixture to start this season.
Maybe, but I'm thinking of the home fixture last season.
That was dreadful. Yes,
when we lost 3-0, and you look at the average position maps, and like Lacazette was and like Everett, not just Lacazette, Everett, like Aubameyang was basically like by the corner flag. Lacazette was probably where Ben White was in the average position map for this Saturday. It was just it was a really, really low, dreadful result, and I just don't see that happening. Even if we lose 3-0, I don't see that happening. If you know what I mean.
Did you go to Anfield this year, Theo? I can't remember if you went or not.
No, I didn't. No,
okay.
No.
I just rewatched a bit of that earlier, and we were in that game. Remember the first goal to set piece? And I felt it. They just had a bit of pressure. There was a little Arteta incident, and then they got a set piece and goal. And I remember thinking, you know what? You just about deserve that. And then we made a mistake thereafter. Up until that point, I felt we were okay. And that was away at Anfield. And
that's the one where we were playing well. We had a good half. And then if I remember correctly, second half, Sambi kind of fell apart, right? Gave the ball away a couple times.
The whole narrative after the game was basically that nothing was happening, and Klopp engineered this touchline argument to get, which I think is really far-fetched. I think the argument happened and it might have had an impact, but it's all about, you know what it's like when you win. It's like, oh, Klopp engineered this to get the crowd going. It's like
how they used to talk about Mourinho as a genius.
It's like, well, if he wanted to do that, he'd have just turned around to the crowd and G'd them up. He wouldn't have engineered this weird situation. But yeah, it could. But the reason people said that was because for the first half hour, nothing was happening.
We were fine, wasn't we? We were absolutely fine. And I'm thinking, I think we had an offside goal that Aubameyang laid across to Lacazette, I think it was. And I remember thinking, actually, I wasn't watching it because my son was talking to me about it. I think I was at the rugby, England, South Africa, that was it. And basically, I remember thinking, we got a chance here. And suddenly they've scored. Do you know what I mean? And I remember that feeling of parity for a period. Now we've got the crowd this week. So let's see. I know I say it every time. I know you're going to embarrass me when we get smashed. But I got a feeling we're gonna do something. I really do.
Well,
it's now or never, mate.
There's certainly not going to be many situations you can go into to play the best team, feeling about as good. I mean, we are the form team in the league, and we're riding a high. They are obviously playing very well and riding their own high. They won't be with, I think, arguably their best player, even though they have player. You know, people are shrugging off the Salah.
Is Salah out? Is he? Is he out?
Yeah. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Well, Jota's not, and he's the one that hurts us, right? So
and Mane hurts us, right? I get it.
He was rested. He was rested for this game. So,
but the moral of the story is like, look, they can still hurt you. I just think with the crowd, with the way we're playing, it's a good measuring stick. And oh, by the way, if it doesn't go the way we need it to, I don't think it loses you any of the goodwill of the run we've been on. So it is again, people hate the word free hit. I'm not saying it's a free hit. There's no such thing as that. You need to go try to get points, but I don't think there's a scenario where the good feeling is lost based on how this goes. So we'll just have to see how that goes. We will have some kind of Patreon pod tomorrow of some variety, maybe a rewatch. Just depends what we can sneak in. Obviously, have the instant reaction after the Liverpool game and a regular pod the rest of the week and so on and so forth. So that'll do it for now. Paul's on Twitter at PausMyPants. Thanks, Pause. Woohoo! Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter at Roberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Weird woohoo from you there, Paul. That's fine, though. I'll just assume it's just something going on in your life. Whatever. Puberty. Who knows? In any event, well, here we go. Big game. Chance to measure up. We'll see how it goes. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Liverpool 0.